I was probably 17 when I first got into Percocets. I tore both my shoulders wrestling, and between 17 and 25, I had a really, really tough time with that. You know, I was a kid who was like a level 1 student in high school. I was a president of my class. You know, I had a lot of things going for me, but I also loved how the drugs and the drinking and the party lifestyle kind of gave me this edge. You know, I think I did it a lot to like be cool and fit in, which is, I think as a child, right, is something like as an insecure kid, that's what I always wanted. And, you know, it took me down a place where after I had graduated from Penn State, I was in a fraternity there, and I had managed to get into the law school by the skin of my teeth. I was like the last person admitted. And I still remember my dad like walking around my house being like, you better not fail out.
Wow, so a lot of pressure early on.
A lot of pressure, and I always wanted my dad to be proud of me. I really tried in law school that first year, and I got great grades, but when the second year hit and I kind of got comfortable, I got back into like the drug-seeking behavior that had gotten me in so much trouble before, and this time it was worse than ever. And in 2016, it finally culminated with me going to drug rehab. Ironically, it was 5 minutes down the street from where I grew up, right? So like imagine the feeling of being like in a drug rehab 5 minutes from your parents' house and being like, what the hell happened to me? How did I get here? I don't belong here. And crazy story, Jesse. So there was a guy in the bed next to me in the rehab, and he had worked for the same judge in like the mid 1980s that I was working for that summer in New Jersey, Judge Simandl, since deceased, RIP. He had worked for Judge Simandl in the 80s, and now here he was, obese, in this rehab bed, screaming about like suicide. And it was like God was just telling me, like, if you don't change your ways now, like this is you down the road. And I have been sober 7 years, and I think it's important to say, like, that was in 2016. From 2016 to 2018, there was no top dog law. Like, I didn't go right into building this business and all that. I spent 2 years really after drug rehab just focusing on me, going to like sobriety related meetings, trying to understand like what happened and to try to build a new foundation. You know, self-confidence comes from keeping the promises you make to yourself. And if you're someone in addiction, you tell yourself day after day that you're not going to do something only to violate your own word. And so you lose a lot of confidence in yourself. And so for those 2 years, you know, waking up when I said I was going to wake up, working out when I said I was going to work out, eating clean when I said I was going to eat clean, doing my assignments when I said I was going to do the assignments, right? Like I started to build that trust in myself again, which I think was the foundation for what I ended up being able to do in business. But yeah, it wasn't an easy ride.
I can't imagine, man, because I mean, the success rate of someone going to rehab, I'm assuming, is probably pretty low.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I felt very grateful because, you know, I was still in law school at the time. You know, I did a JD MBA program, so I actually did a law degree and an MBA, and I had done a lot of things that really could have ruined my life, like felony charges or, you know, some other situation where you really have a lot harder of a time coming back. And one of the things that I had in the back of my head was like, dude, if you can just like get this problem under control right now, your whole future is ahead of you. And I actually have a lot of admiration for guys that, you know, have ruined their marriages. Their kids don't talk to them. They have 3 felonies and they're still having to like dig deep in that place to change themselves, right? Yeah. For me, I felt blessed because it was like, I knew if I could do this now, I could still like write my own story to the book. And, you know, that was part of what motivated me, though, to take it seriously and to stay with it, was because I knew that I might not have another chance. This might be my one window to really like step into the person I wanted to be, but I had to seize it then. Yeah.
So you started stepping into the person by keeping those promises to yourself every morning, getting up, working out, like you said. When did Top Dog Law start? Why did you even want to get into law in the first place?
So after rehab, I didn't have much of a social life, right? I still remember, actually, I had 2 of my good buddies who I'd lived with got this like crazy apartment in Center City, Philly, and they had this Halloween party like 2 weeks after I'm out of drug rehab, and like every group of girls we knew was going, and like that was my scene prior to ending up in rehab, right? And I made that decision that night to stay home. And I've made a lot of decisions since then to stay home. And because I didn't have that social life, when someone came up to me in my apartment complex and said, hey, I was starting this marketing company selling advertising to lawyers, I thought, well, I got a lot of time on my hands. Like I'm not really doing much else. So like, sure, why don't I help you? I'll try to make some side money. And I did. I ended up making like up to $8,000 a month in recurring sales commissions by selling lawyers on pay-per-click and SEO advertising. But the biggest benefit I got wasn't the income. It was that I got to meet personal injury lawyers all across the country and learn, what do they do? I got to see these guys had like planes in some cases. Like I got to understand that they weren't really lawyers. They were businessmen that were running law firms. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, I want to do that. And so I ended up starting my own personal injury law firm in Philly. This is prior to the COVID pandemic. So it was in office. You know, I took every dollar I had, $187,000. I started my own personal injury law firm. And, you know, I worked like heck. And there were some struggles. I mean, the hardest part is, you know, in personal injury, when you get a new client, you don't get paid when you sign up that client. That client doesn't pay you. You only get paid 2 years later when the case settles. So for the first 2 years of your business, you have basically no income.
How were you able to survive during those first 2 years?
It was
especially you literally said I went all in. You spent every dollar into that.
I spent every dollar, and so it was like, well, I had rationed out the money that I got. I had $100,000 in sales commissions. I had a line of credit in my personal bank, which I think was $11,000. I managed to get $35,000 from this like small bank called Key Bank, where like I'm pretty sure she fudged the numbers on like
shout out Key Bank.
Shout out Key Bank. And then I had like this loan shark guy who you know, charged me 15, 16, 17% interest, but it was like I needed all the money I could get my hands on, and that business would have worked. I think what I realized though about 2 years into that business was that I was better at bringing in the clients than I was actually doing the operational heavy lifting. And there was this other lawyer in Philly who came up to me and he was like, hey, like you're 28 years old at this point. He's like, you're bringing in 40 new clients a month. He's like, that's like top 10 for the lawyers in Philly. He's like, but you're not really experienced actually doing the litigation work on these cases. He's like, how about we partner up together? And I was resistant to that idea at first because my original dream was like, hey, I want to build up this law firm and do it all internally. But then I realized, I'm like, oh man, if I can partner with him and I can focus my efforts on bringing in clients and building out my social media platform and later getting into billboards, radio, all the other advertising we do, right? Spending millions and millions of dollars. It's like I can become in the top 1% business origination in the legal category. And the only way I get to that top 1% is if I'm not doing all the other stuff related to the operational work of the litigation. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this one thing that I seem to be good at, right? Play to your strengths. And, you know, we've been able to scale that from, you know, 40 cases a month to thousands. So
it's amazing.
Yeah.
A couple things I want to touch on. One, you just started getting going at like 26, because it sounds like by 28 you started having buzz. People reached out to you in Philly. You were starting to become known, but you started at 26. I think a lot of people right now are like, if I don't become a millionaire by 20, man, my life is over. Do you see that a lot?
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the things that's really been interesting about building the business is you want everything to happen so fast. And so I'll see these other lawyers that I know, I see at these legal conferences, and they're doing, you know, 80, 90, $100 million in revenue. And, you know, I think 2 years ago we did one, and then we did 4 last year, and we just had our 8-figure year in 2023. So,
man, if I had a dropping bombs button, I'd push it.
We're on our way. But here's the thing that's interesting is like, you can only go from like 1 to 4 to 13 to, you know, you can't go from 1 to 80. And I think me, like every young entrepreneur, they want to go from 1 to 80. And you realize it's somebody's life work, decades of how they got to 80 to 100 million. And you have to go through the steps of like first becoming financially free, making, you know, $5,000 a month, not from a corporate job, and then 10 grand a month. And then you have your first $1 million year, and then you do multiple millions, and then you have your first 8-figure year. And it's like, that's the path to getting there. And there's no like cheat code. It's all hard work.